Hello, my name is Katusha I use she, her pronouns, and I would like to call us into our worship to help us move from our community concerns into the serious and beautiful business of attending. Because I have been wondering recently if the opposite of gratitude might be anxiety. Because I've been anxious recently, and I'm learning that it robs me of the space that I need to notice the things that bring me joy. I learned a few days ago that the root word for anxiety is about constricting and narrowing, about being forced into a space too small for our whole selves. My anxious mind is a flashlight beam that is not wide enough to light up the things that support and inspire me. This narrow beam makes me prioritize wrong. Anxious me says I can go for a walk in the woods only when I have vacuumed and meal prepped and cleaned out my email inbox. She says that if I shop for gifts online by myself rather than with friends at a craft fair, I will have more time for something. She forgets that a walk in the woods energizes me for the tasks that I have to do, and that spending time with people and looking at beautiful things is what I was saving my time for to begin with. The Zen proverb says, meditate for an hour a day, unless you're too busy, in which case, meditate for 2 hours a day. Anxious me thinks that Zen proverbs are a luxury for people without to-do lists. I walk with two close friends a lot. We do it to keep our bodies moving and to kvetch and laugh and to get another viewpoint on the stones that were tumbling in our mind. Every once in a while, as we stomp around the neighborhood or one of the local parks like a very cute infantry squad, one of us will stop dead and point to the beginning of a sunrise, to a squirrel mid-burglary, to someone's creative lawn decoration, a dew-glistening flower, a rainbow, a bird, a sunbeam, an icicle. It is a small candle flame of attention, of delight, and it grows as it's passed. Once we've said it out loud, we can all carry it with us, along with all of our worries and all of our tasks. And it illuminates a space slightly larger than the narrow flashlight beam of my anxious mind. You all do this for me on Sunday mornings. I am not joking when I talk about the serious and beautiful business of attending. Our time in worship raises the overhead lights. My flashlight beam might still be on what I need to do, but while we attend together, I can see again the why. The open-hearted community, the justice-seeking world, and I am grateful for it, for you. Thank you for the light that you carry and the light that you share. Thank you for the opportunity to worship together.
All right. Greetings, everyone. I'm Reverend John Mark Ormechea, and I missed you this past week as we had some pretty horrible inclement weather, and the roads were really slippery, and it wasn't worth our safety. But because I was not with you this week, today I get to come from you from King's Chapel in Boston, at least virtually. So, to begin, I would love to start in a spirit of prayer and meditation. So, Spirit of Life, Mother Earth, and God of many names and no name. Breath that moves through all things, we pause in this moment to remember that even now, even here, we are surrounded by grace. We give thanks for this day and a simple gift of waking up, for the breath that fills our lungs, for the faces around us that remind us we are not alone. We confess that gratitude does not always come easily. There are days when the weight of the world feels too heavy, when the news blares louder than hope, when loss and worry cloud our sight. In those moments, O Holy One, teach us to see again, to notice the light that still breaks through the cracks, the laughter that still finds its way into our weariness, the love that still insists on being born. May our hearts be softened by awareness, that we might find moments to be grateful in the rising stream pouring of our morning coffee, in the quiet acts of kindness exchanged between strangers, and in the courage to keep showing up for one another. Let our gratitude not be shallow or sentimental, but deep enough to sustain us, bold enough to resist despair, and tender enough to keep us human. As we prepare to hear words of reflection and truth, open us, mind, heart, and spirit, to the sacred possibility that even now there is something holy unfolding in us and around us. For the gift of this life, this breath, this moment, we give thanks. Amen. This sermon is titled Tending to the Garden of Gratitude. When most people talk about gratitude, it's framed as a personal virtue, a good habit, a nice attitude, maybe even a polite response to receiving something. But in the life of faith, gratitude is something much deeper. It's not a feeling, it's a posture of the soul. In Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, gratitude is an act of recognizing God's presence, appreciating the awe of existence, and acknowledging that life itself is a gift we didn't create. In Buddhism, gratitude arises from awareness of interdependence, the understanding that none of us exist alone, that every meal, every breath, every kindness depends on countless unseen hands. And for many Unitarian Universalists, gratitude is the thread that holds our pluralism together. It reminds us that all life, from atoms to galaxies, participates in a shared unfolding of the universe. To live with gratitude, then, is to live awake, to see the holy shimmering in the ordinary. Gratitude is not a denial of what is hard. It is the quiet insistence that love still has the final word. Now, it might sound strange to call gratitude a form of resistance, but hear me out. We live in a culture that thrives on dissatisfaction. That is, on convincing us that we don't have enough, aren't enough, and never will be enough. Advertising, social media, even the metrics we use to measure success, all depend on the logic of scarcity. But gratitude disrupts that. When we practice gratitude, we're refusing to participate in the economy of not enough. We are, in a very real sense, performing a small act of rebellion by saying, this life, this breath, this moment is enough for now. There's an old story from the desert monastics of early Christianity. A monk asks his teacher, what must I do to please God? The teacher replies, do what is in front of you, give thanks, and be kind. That's it. Not because gratitude ignores the brokenness of the world, but because it roots us in the possibility of transformation. Gratitude doesn't make us passive. It helps us remember what's worth protecting. To be grateful in a time of despair is to proclaim, there is still something sacred here. And that, beloveds, is resistance. Cultivating gratitude is a practice of seeing again. It is learning to notice what we have trained ourselves to overlook or take for granted. I think of a story from my own life, a season when everything seemed to be falling apart. I had finally decided to no longer pursue a fellowship through the Ministerial Formation Committee. as I was unwilling to sacrifice the well-being of my family for their approval. At the same time, we were being bombarded by the media with everything but positive news. I had just been notified that my job was being cut from the company I worked for, and a couple of months later, my partner would lose their job. And all of this right before the holiday season. It was during this time that for me, even prayer felt dry. I remember sitting in my office after applying for likely the 200th job, staring at my cup of coffee and wondering what on earth was I supposed to be thankful for. And then I noticed the steam rising, the way the sunlight caught it just right. I thought about the hands that harvested those coffee beans, the water that ran through those pipes, the joy my son experienced seeing a coffee pot brew for the first time. Suddenly, that small cup of coffee became a sermon that I didn't know I needed, an entire liturgy of connection. Gratitude begins not in abundance, but in attention. Which is why one of my favorite rituals is proclaiming with the psalmist, "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." I do this even on the hardest of days, especially on the hardest of days, because it's not about pretending life is easy. It's about learning to see that even in the hardest moments, life still offers beauty. To poorly paraphrase Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, when you drink your coffee, you must be completely aware that you are drinking your coffee, aware of its origins, the people connected to it, the gift of simple technology used to brew it. Only then can you truly be alive. Gratitude trains us to see the world not as something to be consumed, but as something to be cherished. So how do we cultivate this practice in a world that often feels like it's falling apart? I want to offer you a few doorways into daily gratitude, spiritual practices that don't require you to be an expert in anything except paying attention, which I know as someone with ADHD can also be difficult at times. The first is keeping a gratitude journal. Start each morning or end each evening by writing down 3 things you're grateful for. They don't have to be profound. Sometimes the smallest things, for example, the way the cat curls up beside you or how the rain sounds on the roof, are the most holy. Over time, this practice reshapes how you see the world. And the next is express thanks in prayer or reflection. However you understand the divine, be it God, the spirit, the universe, the sacred, offer words of thanks. Not only for the big moments, but for the quiet ones. Gratitude becomes a kind of conversation, a rhythm that tunes us back toward trust. And share gratitude in community. Tell people when they've touched your life. Write a note, send a text, speak it aloud. Gratitude is not meant to stay locked inside of us. It wants to multiply. The next one is serving others. Nothing deepens gratitude like service. When we offer our time or labor for others, we encounter the interconnectedness that gratitude reveals. Acts of service are acts of awareness, small reminders that we belong to each other. And the last one is ask what you can put down to be more in this moment. This one is newer for me and was given to me by the incredible Reverend Tandy Rogers, who was teaching my UU contextual faith formation class. It was during her class that I finally realized that as it stands, the path for UU fellowship wasn't attainable. And at the same time, we were still only bringing in one income and unemployment, and everything I carried came to the front of my mind. Excuse me for that. Everything I carried came to the front of my mind as soon as she instructed, "I want everyone to take a moment to acknowledge what you are putting down to be here today. Silent tears poured down my face as I reflected on it all. So now I constantly ask myself, what can I put down even for a moment? To better enjoy the moments with my partner, my children, my friends, and it makes me all the more grateful for what I'm able to experience. Each of these practices is simple, but taken together, they form a rhythm of grace that is a way of moving through the world with eyes open and a heart steady. However, let's be honest, there are days when gratitude feels impossible, when the diagnosis comes back worse than expected, when a friendship ends, when the weight of the world, the wars, the violence, the injustice feels too heavy to bear. What does gratitude mean then? Gratitude does not ask us to be grateful for suffering. That's spiritual bypassing. That is the opium of the masses that Karl Marx was wary of. And the painful sentiment echoes throughout many of our lives, saying, God has a reason for everything. And whether you ground that in a form of God or simply an exercise of cognitive dissonance, it's harmful. Instead, gratitude invites us to look for grace within suffering. That is, to notice where love is still breaking through. Think of the Psalms. They are full of lament, full of protest, and even there, the writers often end with a note of gratitude, yet will I praise you. Not because everything is fine, because even in the valley of the shadow, the presence of the holy is still real. Think about those small moments of laughter during the darkest times, when even for a moment you can put down the pain and experience a small dose of happiness. Gratitude in this sense is not naive. It's courageous. It's the practice of saying, I will not let despair have the final word. Gratitude is not a transactional exercise. It's a way of seeing and living that creates a revolution in our everyday lives. One of the most profound aspects of gratitude is that it reminds us that we are not alone. Every breath we take is borrowed from a tree. Every meal we eat is the product of countless hands and histories. Every joy we experience carries traces of others' labor and love. In Buddhist thought, the concept is that everything exists in relation to everything else. In Christian language, we might say we are members of one body, knit together in divine love. Gratitude brings us back into that interconnected web of relationships. It dissolves the illusion of self-sufficiency and replaces it with awe. When we realize how profoundly we depend on one another, gratitude naturally blossoms into compassion, and compassion naturally leads to justice. That's why gratitude is not a passive emotion, but instead it's the soil from which action grows. The grateful person does not turn away from the suffering of the world. They turn toward it, carrying with them the conviction that healing is possible because love is already there. Gratitude is not only a personal practice, it's something we can cultivate together. Imagine what it would look like at every meeting, every gathering, every potluck, and protest begin not with complaints or logistics, but with thanksgiving. With a moment to name what is good, what is holy, what is worth holding on to. And when we begin our meetings by expressing gratitude not as a formality, but as a way to ground ourselves. Gratitude can help us remember that even the work of justice is grace made visible. Here in this congregation, gratitude can be the glue that holds us together through difference. It reminds us that this shared life the singing, the serving, the showing up is a gift. And when we share gratitude in community, we become mirrors for each other's blessings. We begin to see that gratitude is not a zero-sum game. The more we share it, the more there is. Like any discipline, gratitude takes practice. It's not automatic, and it's not always easy, but it shapes the soul the way water shapes stone, slowly, gently, persistently. Spiritual writers across traditions say the same thing. Gratitude is the doorway to joy. But I would add, it's also the doorway to courage. Because when we are grateful, we no longer operate from scarcity. When we know we are blessed, we stop hoarding and start giving. When we see our interdependence clearly, we become freer to risk love again and again and again. Gratitude doesn't mean we stop fighting for justice. It gives us the stamina to keep going. It reminds us of what we're fighting for. So how do we live this out when the world feels like it's on fire? We start small. We breathe. We name what is good right here, right now. When we see violence, we give thanks for those who march for peace. When we encounter cruelty, we give thanks for every act of kindness that still blooms in the cracks. When we feel hopeless, we give thanks for the people who refuse to stop hoping. Gratitude does not excuse injustice, it exposes it. Because when we recognize the beauty of life, we can no longer tolerate what diminishes it. The theologian John Sabrino once wrote that the task of faith is to take the crucified down from the cross. Gratitude is one of the ways we do that. It keeps our hearts tender enough to keep caring. Now, when I was preparing to write this sermon, I was at a loss for a metaphor. But as I looked outside in our backyard, incomplete in the work needed to be done because of how busy life can be, I started to think of gratitude as a garden. A garden that eventually Kelsey and I will get to. Because every act of attention is a seed. Every word of thanks, a drop of water. Every shared meal, a ray of sunlight. And sometimes the garden is overgrown, sometimes it's parched, but still life finds a way. And maybe the point is not to have a perfect garden. I certainly won't next year. But to keep tending it together. To look around this sanctuary at the faces of those beside you and whisper quietly in your heart, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up to love even when it's hard. Thank you for being part of this unfolding, imperfect, holy garden we call community. Beloveds, gratitude is not the end of faith, it is the beginning. It's what allows us to meet each new day, not with fear, but with curiosity. It's what opens our eyes to the miracle of being alive in this moment together. It's what gives us the courage to say, even here, even now, love is still possible. So as you go from this place today, I invite you to carry this question with you. What would it mean to live gratefully? Not just occasionally, but intentionally. May you wake each morning with the words, thank you. May you end each night, even in weariness, with the same. And may gratitude shape the way you see, the way you act, and the way you love. Amen. So before you walk away today, I have a small benediction for online moments like this. Go forth from this place with grateful hearts, not because everything is easy, but because everything is connected. May gratitude be your prayer when words fail, your compass when the road feels lost, your lantern when the night grows long. And may your life, in all its ordinary beauty, become a song of thanks to the world. Our worship is over. May our service begin. Thank you.